My name is Annabelle. I'm 20 years old from the UK, and this happened to me in high school, which is what we call college here in the UK. This was when I was 16. I'm about to tell you about the scariest day of my life. It sounds dramatic, I know, but you'll see why. So for context, my school had these lanyards with ID cards on them, and although anyone can walk into the building, you can only go beyond the foyer if you scan one of these IDs on a screen which opens the door into the school. The IDs have your face and name on them, but a lot of kids flip them around so you can't see their picture. You also need this to open up pretty much every door in the school other than for classrooms. Also, this was a fairly newly built school. It was really small but looked bigger because the building was pretty large. A third of the building was a special school for kids with learning disabilities. Another third of it was a nursery, and the last third of it was the actual high school. I had just started at this high school, and I vividly remember everyone being told on the first day to make sure not to let anyone in the school that we didn't know. The day that this incident happened, it was the second week of school, but this was actually only my second full day there, as I'd been feeling sick all week. I had geography class all day, and it was about halfway through the day when this takes place, about 20 minutes after lunch period. I remember drinking a heck load of juice that I got from the cafeteria at lunch because I had to finish it all before lunch period ended since we're not allowed drinks out in class, and I had nowhere to put it without it spilling over. So 20 minutes later, and yeah, I really needed to use the bathroom. I asked my teacher if I could go quickly, and we're not usually allowed to go to the bathroom during class anyway, so he was pretty annoyed about this since we only just had break, but he could see I really needed to go, so he reluctantly agreed. This is significant because at this point, nobody else would really be walking around the school. I never even really saw teachers walking around often during class hours. I left the class and let myself through a set of double doors into the cafeteria, and keep in mind, there was nobody in there at this point. I carried on walking into another large room with a second set of classrooms, used the bathroom, and let myself back into the cafeteria again to head back to my classroom. When I let myself back through the doors to the cafeteria though, there was a man sitting at one of the tables. It wasn't weird for someone to be in there. Like I said, people aren't usually walking around during class hours, but they still do. I mean, I was too at that time. I didn't know who it was that was sitting there. He was too old to be a student, so I assumed it was either a teacher or a parent, and I just continued walking. But then he said, "Hey," and I let out a squeal because I'm quite a nervous, jumpy person anyway, and I wasn't expecting him to speak to me. I was pretty embarrassed, but he laughed and said, "Sorry, didn't mean to scare you." This is when I realized he actually had a lanyard on, so at this point I was assuming he was a teacher. What I realized though when I look back on this is that even though he had his lanyard on with the ID part was flipped over so that the side with your face and name on it was facing the back side of the card holder that's attached to the lanyard. Like I said earlier, kids would do that all the time at the school. The scanner would still work, so it wasn't a big deal, but definitely weird for a teacher to do. I didn't really pay attention to this detail at the time though. "I need some help getting some work things out of my car. Do you mind coming out with me for just a sec?" he asked me. I didn't hesitate to reply with, "Yeah, of course," because again, I just assumed this was a teacher. We walked out of the cafeteria in silence and into the foyer and then out of the building, and I kind of noticed he seemed a bit nervous. Like, teachers usually make small talk with you when you're walking somewhere with them, and he was saying nothing. And also, he was moving his hands a lot. Like at one point, he had his hands in his pockets, and then he'd take them out and kind of hold his hands together. I'm really shy and not too good in social situations, so I didn't make any attempts at small talk either. With the layout of the front of the school, after we left the building, you've got about 50 or so meters, which is about 55 yards, to the car park, which you can't see until you're right next to it because there's a bunch of bushes which obscure it. If you walk straight on without turning into the car park, you'll be off the school property. So we were walking to the car park in silence, and then he suddenly says, "Yeah, my work stuff is in the boot. That's what we call the trunk of a car in the UK. He said, "I have a few bags, so I just need you to help me carry a couple into the school." I said, "Yeah, that's fine." We got to the car park, and he said, "My car is the blue one down at the end." And as we got a few meters from it, I could kind of see something in the back seat. And as we were getting closer to it, I realized there were at least 2 men hiding in the back seat. I froze, and instead of running away, I blanked, and I guess they saw that I could see them, because the back door swung open and all of a sudden, there was a man scrambling out of the car, and the man who I thought was a teacher grabbed my arm as I turned to run back to the school. This guy was pretty tall and large, by the way, and for context, I'm 5'2" and quite underweight, so I don't know how I managed it, rush of adrenaline or whatever, but I used all the strength in my body to yank my arm out of his grip and start running back towards the school. I could hear multiple heavy footsteps running after me, but thank God, they stopped pretty soon after I started running away, because my school had big glass automatic doors, and you have to just wait for them to open, and they definitely would have caught up to me if they kept going. I guess the fact that they were glass doors, though, would have been risky if there was someone walking by. Either way, though, I got into the foyer and ran straight into the open cafe, which was attached to the library, and I ran up to the person working at the cafe to tell her the situation. She calmed me down and came with me into the school to a teacher's office and called my parents and the police. There's security cameras in the parking lot, so they were caught and charged with attempted kidnapping. Also, turned out that man was able to enter the building because some kid dropped their lanyard outside the school, and that's what he was using and why he flipped the ID over. I didn't go back to school for a couple of weeks, and I'm still having therapy for this experience, but I felt writing this whole thing down and sharing my story would help me process things. This remains the scariest experience of my life.